a special room. We share it occasionally with some of the silver classes now that the school's gotten bigger. But we have a special room in back that we keep the heavy casting equipment. So the room you're in right now is really the wax room. And so we start with, this is lost wax casting, centrifugal. So we don't typically vacuum cast unless the piece is too big to go in the centrifuge. And we do that, as I was saying a little earlier, because you can get finer detail with the centrifuge, which is why most jewelers use it. You're pushing the metal through thinner pieces typically than vacuum casting, and the metal's hitting the mold at about 100 miles an hour. So after it snaps and starts spinning. So you can imagine you can really force that metal in there very quickly. This room is really about getting the metal into the piece as well as what the piece looks like. We start everyone off with a 1 or 2 or production type waxes, so you can start to get the feel of doing the wax work. So your first piece might look something like this: a simple ring bonded to what's called a sprue on your sprue base, and with the sprue that typically comes on the model. And that gets a start, and actually some people have a difficult time with it. Sometimes it's very easy, which is why we start you here. A more complicated ring would have additional sprues. Say if this ring was several inches wide and had filigree on the top, we would have additional sprues out to the sides to make sure the metal could get to all those pieces and still be hot. Because our metal is going to freeze at a little around 1200 degrees. Our mold's going to be about 900 degrees when we cast it. So it will actually freeze in the mold at those temperatures. So we have to get the metal where it's going quickly, especially if you have little parts that are wiggly and difficult for the metal to flow through. After you graduate from doing some basic spruing, you can start to get complicated and do what's called a tree. So I'm casting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces here, all in the same cast. It's more like a production cast. These pieces can be the same like they are here, or they can be different. The result of that piece is something that looks like this, unfinished. And this is a little wax that I designed and made myself. It's a scarab. And then the end result is this, after you do the inlay work. A lot of my pieces that I like to do are inlay type pieces because I'm a cabber at heart. You can progress to something like this that could be a surround around a cab that is just a mold made from another frame. You can do organics. Here we have a walnut shell that's cast in bronze that's meant to be inlaid also. And here is one of Cindy's pieces. These are the bees. These are from organics class, so these all were live critters at one time. And the spruing gets much more complicated, as you can see, which is why organics is casting too. We want you to be able to sprue pretty proficiently before you get to try something like this. Other results from organics class are simple flowers, any number of them, and you have to have techniques to thicken them up. You have pieces where we can work around stones, which is one of the things that we like to teach people. Again, I'm a cabber, trying to get rid of cabs. So to do that, we work around cabs. But we can do it in a manner that, if you want to pass a couple of these around, that make it look like the stone is actually being cast around. So when people look at it, everyone says, "How did you do that?" Well, for that answer, you need to take casting with us. So this is a little bit of promotion, but it's fairly simple, and you get a lot of unusual techniques with that. What we try to avoid, and we do have the occasional mishap, is this is Emmett's Folly. He spent about 2 hours working on the wax and ended up with a mold of the back of the casting machine. Because instead of doming it, he poured a little too little investment in it, and the metal shot right through the mold. So, you know, that's sort of a bit of a mishap. And we keep that and show this to remind people. We don't want to do this. After we get our wax done, it looks something like this again. We go through a process where we make a high temperature plaster based on a definite formula from the manufacturer. We have charts and everything to help you out with that. So we measure your flask and it tells you exactly how much powder of investment and how much water to put in to mix. It's a time process. Sometimes people get a little nervous about that. But by the end of today, I wasn't even going back and watching anyone. I was out here doing other things. So you get very proficient very quickly. But your flask looks like this before it goes in the kiln. So you've got a back end that's a funnel that will end up being the button of your piece. Writing on top, ID is very important. We learned that today because I'll tell you, when you have 20 of these things sitting there on the counter, they all look alike. And I got to know what piece it is, whose it is, how much metal is in it, so the right person casts the right metal in the right mold. So that's really what a casting instructor does, is organize and sort, I think. We have any number of things that we can do with our waxes. We have different waxes for different things. We have sheets, we have rods, we have squares, we have bezels, we have sculpting wax, we have carving wax. So anything is a possibility. I mean, this is sculpted around this crystal with sculpting wax.
That's pretty cool.
Completely different. This is organics on a piece of sheet wax wrapped as a band. You can, again, pass a couple of these around. You know, this one is actually hand carved from a chunk of wax, and it's set with the stone in it, and the stone actually penetrates all the way through to your ring, so that you get any benefits from the stone touching your body. You know, you make very specialized jewelry like this for people. Any questions on the first part of it? I mean, most of our work in here is done with very simple tools, mat knives, and alcohol lamps. Believe it or not. Most of the time, that's what we're working with.
Do you require that the waxes be done here before you cast?
No, some people will make waxes, especially if they've already had the class, will make some waxes so that they understand the flow at home and bring them in.
Okay.
But we really don't like people to come in and just have, 50 of those and expect to cast them in class. To do some special ones, which a number of people here have done, and bring those in and get some attention to spruing them and everything, and get some help to make sure it comes out.
It takes me a while to make a wax cast, that's why I was asking.
Yes. With that, I guess we'll go back and start warming up everything in the back room, where we do most of our investment and the actual casting. So we sort of break up and go around. I'll have my Vanna for the evening, Beth, help all the way up. I can always tell a silversmith, the first thing she started to do when the torch was on was start doing this circle bit. We don't want that in here. We're melting this stuff. And believe me, as fast as it melts in silver class, this stuff is not easy to actually melt and get fully liquid. It takes a little while. Right now she's warming up the crucible. If you take the class, sometimes it seems like I'm a little, pushy might be the right word, maybe a little too nice, because it's like to keep people moving through when we actually start casting, because the hotter we keep that crucible in there, it can mean we get done before lunch or we're still casting at supper time. I just put the metal in the crucible at this time. So these are actually old screws from one of my former casts. We use all of your screws. That was a little pinch of borax that's a flux and helps keep the oxygen at the right levels. And also, every time we cast, we lose a little bit of borax from the crucible out the door. So we're replenishing that, because if you don't have a good glaze on the crucible, the silver sticks and doesn't slide out. Carbon rod, what I'm doing is checking for consistency of the metal. Right now she's still got a pretty good sized slug because there's a big button in there. But I'm feeling the consistencies because I want it to be essentially liquid, water-based, not sluggish. Also looking if it's a cast of recycled scraps and things. You might have a piece in there that has silver colored brass or steel. So I'm looking for those lurkers in the bottom to get them out so we don't ruin the cast. Been in the kiln since 7 o'clock this morning, ramping up to a burnout of 300 degrees for several hours, then up to 900 degrees to soak, then it goes up to about 1200 degrees to fully burn out the wax and cure the mold, and then it ramps back down to 900 degrees, and it's been holding that since about 4 o'clock. So we're definitely at 900 degrees, which is our casting code. And we're going to let this go here in a second, and it goes really quick, so don't jump. Hang on, wait. Oh. Metal's all in.
Wow.
Before I could even say it, the metal is gone out of the crucible.
Wow. Can you see it?
And now we let this spin down. Part of the reason we're spinning down is to cool the crucible and to cool the flask enough that the metal doesn't run back out. If you have a really, really big flask with a lot of metal, I've actually seen it stop and have some metal run out. So it's something we try to avoid.
Definitely.
So we let this fully spin down. And after we do that, I'll take it outside and we'll put it on the metal table out there with the button up for about 5 minutes. And that time varies with the size of the flask and the amount of metal, so we vary that. It will also vary a lot with what metal you are casting. If you're casting argentium and you let it sit out there for 5 minutes and rest and quench it, it's going to shatter on you. You have to let it go at least 20 minutes. And there's a number of metals like that, newer metals. So when I say you need to know what your metal is that you're casting, if it's scrap, we need to know it because it'll either make or break the piece. We also cast ancient bronze. We make sure there's no lead in these materials that we're using, or we will cast gold if you have it.
Now the ancient bronze would take longer to heat up. In the
Much
crucible.
longer. Here, ancient bronze, instead of going to 1680 or whatever the silver is, we have to go up above 1800 degrees. And it is not as conductive as the silver, so it takes much longer to heat. And you can hear the crucible cracking as it cools. That's the borax glaze in it that we put on to condition it before we actually start using it. And this is
I'll get out of the way.
this is a small piece, so I'll slow it down a little since people are watching. Okay, we got a button in there, so we got a piece.
Amber mango for sure. Yeah, go ahead. You do
We've got about 5 minutes on that. Anyone got any questions while we wait for this to cool?
You doing any 2 weeks?
Here we go. Okay, we always do this horizontally so we don't get it in the face. It's still pretty hot.
Is that water boiling? I mean, is
That's what the noise is. It's water boiling from right around the flask.
Oh, Ruby.
And it will take a little bit of cleanup, but I'll clean it up and you guys can see it in the showcase.
Cool.
You can sort of see the organics wrapped around it. Seed pod that will be inlaid.
Oh, nice.
And this gray mass around it, still some of the investment hanging on. So that'll all end up being cleaned off.
Sawed off or
Well, I'll ask the question every woman wants to know. What size is it?